Hey everybody, you're listening to The Jazz Architect. There was a time when the teacher had the information and the student came to class to get it. Well, that arrangement has officially left the building. Today, a student can have an AI tutor sitting in their pocket at 2 o'clock in the morning, and unlike most professors, they have office hours 24 hours a day. So the question is no longer simply, how do we give students information? The question is, what do we do with unlimited information? That question has been on my mind as I recently completed reading Teaching with AI, a practical guide to a new era of human learning by Josue Antonio Bowen and C. Edward Watson, professors at the Johns Hopkins University. One of the ideas that keeps coming back to me is, AI does not have to make our students think less. If we let AI handle some of the early speed bumps, brainstorming, outlining, or generating first questions, perhaps we can free students to go deeper, sooner. The goal is learning that feels more like a thoughtful solo, not a multiple choice test, and that makes the professor's role even more important. This shift may make some teachers uncomfortable, because the role is changing. This is where I sometimes prefer the word professor instead of teacher. Not in every situation, but in many. Traditionally, we think of the teacher as the person who distills information and gives it to the student. But what happens when the student already has access to the information instantly, anytime, anywhere? The professor has to take on more roles. Yes, the professor still has to know the material, but now the larger question becomes, how do I guide the student? How do I help this class use what they know to become better thinkers, better professionals, and more successful people in the world? As information becomes obtainable by almost anyone, everyone, mentorship, guidance, and judgment become more valuable. I think of it almost like a GPS. Getting the map is not necessarily the difficult part anymore. The difficult part is navigating the map and understanding how to get from point A to point B. One route might take you through a mountain range. Another may be completely flat. One path may be faster, or another might teach you more along the way. And anybody who has ever followed a GPS knows technology can give you directions and still somehow have you wondering, how in the world did I end up in this parking lot? There are outside factors you have to learn how to navigate, and not every student is going to choose the same route. It depends on the objective and what you want from the journey. Maybe that becomes one of the most important roles of the professor in this age of AI, not simply giving students the map, but helping them learn how to navigate. Used well, AI can challenge students to think more deeply, ask better questions, test their assumptions, and become more creative. But does that happen automatically? Nope. It depends on how we teach them to use it, which brings us back to the question, what do we do with unlimited information? To answer that, let's think about what education actually is. Education is the process of developing knowledge, skills, judgment, values, and the ability to think and act effectively. It is broader than simply receiving information. Education involves learning how to understand, interpret, question, apply, and build upon what one knows. Education is the development of a person's ability to think, make judgments, solve problems, create and navigate the world. But in school systems, that is not always the end result. Too often, the goal becomes getting the right answer, getting the grade, passing the test, or finding whatever method gets you across the finish line. If education is supposed to develop thinking, judgment, and problem solving, then we have to pay much more attention to how a student arrives at the answer, not simply whether the answer is correct. Because in the age of AI, getting the right answer may become the easiest part. AI can often get there faster than we can. If a student never learns how to reason through a problem, ask better questions, evaluate information, recognize mistakes, or explain why an answer makes sense, that student should be concerned about being left behind. The value is going to be in the thinking process. Sal Khan, the founder of Khan Academy, said something that gets directly to the heart of this. Teachers will know not just the final outcome, but will know the process. I think that word process is crucial. We need students who understand the decisions they made along the way and who can explain and defend their conclusions. Education cannot just be about proving who earned the highest score. It has to be about developing people who know how to think. This is where AI used correctly can become one of the most powerful tools in education. AI can help us work towards an answer, but the danger comes when students become accustomed to being given answers without understanding how those answers were reached. A student can graduate with impressive grades, a degree, and a resume that looks great on paper. But what happens when the student gets hired and is suddenly faced with a problem that does not have an A, B, C, or D answer? That is real life. In the workplace, problems are often ambiguous, and there may be 5 possible answers, maybe 10, or none at all. Who knows? You have to evaluate the situation and ask better questions. Consider different perspectives, make judgments, and ultimately create a solution. There's no professor standing there telling you which answer is correct. And that is where this becomes an issue of job security. A degree may help you get hired, but it cannot guarantee that you will remain employed. If you cannot think through problems, adapt when circumstances change, and produce the information or solutions your organization needs, you may find yourself out of a job very quickly. So let's return to our original question. What do we do with unlimited information? We learn how to judge it, question it. We determine what matters, what does not matter, what applies to the problem in front of us, and what solution actually makes sense. Because unlimited information without judgment can simply become unlimited noise. Education in the age of AI cannot simply be about teaching students how to get the right answer. We have to teach them how to think when there's no obvious answer. AI should not replace that process. It should strengthen it. It should help students ask better questions, test their assumptions, explore possibilities, and eventually arrive at conclusions they can explain and defend. The goal of education should not be to produce people who know how to retrieve answers, but people who know what to do when the answer has not been created yet. And this is where creativity and innovation become extremely important. If AI can help us access information and generate possible answers, then one of the most valuable human contributions becomes our ability to see what others may not see and approach a problem from a different angle. That is something artists have always done. Think about a painter, a sculptor, a composer, or a jazz musician. What they bring to the table is not simply technical skill. They bring perspective. They see possibilities, relationships, patterns, solutions that may not be immediately obvious to everyone else. Sometimes they arrive at an answer through a route that is unconventional, unexpected, or completely new. Jazz is a perfect example of this. When a jazz musician improvises, there's not one predetermined path from the beginning to the end of the solo. The musician is listening, responding, making decisions, taking risks, adjusting to what is happening in the moment, and creating something based on years of knowledge and experience. There may be many directions the music can go, and several of them can work. And if every jazz musician played exactly the same correct solo, we could probably finish the concert a lot earlier and go home. But nobody really wants to hear that. That type of thinking is going to become increasingly valuable in the age of AI. The problems we face in business, education, technology, medicine, government, and society are not simply going to ask us to select A, B, C, or D. Many will not have one clearly defined correct answer. They will require us to interpret incomplete information, bring together different perspectives, experiment, adapt, and ultimately create a solution. That means creativity can no longer be viewed as something that belongs only in the arts. Creativity is becoming a form of problem solving. Innovation happens when someone looks at information that may already exist and connects it in a way that has not been considered before. Artists practice this consistently. They take familiar materials, notes, colors, shapes, words, and movement, and create something that did not previously exist. AI may be able to give us hundreds of possibilities, but human beings still have to determine which possibilities matter. We have to think through the options, articulate our reasoning, and sometimes create an entirely different path that was not initially presented to us. So again, what do we do with unlimited information? Maybe we create new connections with it. Maybe we take two ideas that have never been placed next to each other and ask what happens when we bring them together. Maybe the value is no longer simply knowing more information, but seeing relationships within information that someone or something else has missed. This is why I believe creativity, innovation, critical thinking, and articulation have to become central parts of education in the age of AI. We should not be moving or removing the creative process from education because technology can produce an answer faster. We should be putting creativity back at the center of education, precisely because technology can produce answers so quickly. The future will not simply belong to the person who can find an answer. It will belong to a person who can look at the same information as everyone else, see something different, explain what they see, and turn that perspective into a solution. I'm a huge believer in education, but every now and then I think it's important to watch a child play with a toy, or even something as simple as a cardboard box. Without giving them any instructions, watch what happens. A child may turn that box into a car, a spaceship, a house, a drum, or something none of us could have imagined. There is no manual, there is no correct answer, and there is no grade. There is simply curiosity, experimentation, and possibility. As we get older, we are taught rules. Some come from our culture, some come from our parents, and some from our teachers, institutions, and educational systems. In most cases, those rules are valuable because they give us structure and knowledge and help us understand what generations before us have already learned. But when we are searching for something truly new, sometimes we have to be willing to temporarily put those rules aside. We have to ask, what happens if I try this differently? What happens if I combine two ideas that normally don't belong together? What happens if I take a route that nobody has taught me? That is where experimentation begins. Experimentation is one of the foundations of creativity and innovation because you cannot discover something new if you are only willing to repeat what has already been done. This becomes especially important at the age of AI. AI gives us access to enormous amounts of existing knowledge, patterns, possibilities, but innovation may require us to move beyond what is already known. It may require us to challenge assumptions, make unexpected connections, take risks, and explore ideas that initially seem unusual. In some ways, we may need to recover a little of what that child with the cardboard box already understands. Before someone tells you what the box is supposed to be or supposed to do, ask yourself what else it could be or become. Education gives us the foundation. AI gives us powerful tools, but creativity gives us permission to imagine what has not been created yet. There's actually a creativity exercise that connects directly to this idea called the alternative uses test, developed from the work of psychologist J.P. Guilford. The concept is simple. You take an ordinary object like a paper clip, a toothbrush, or a brick, and ask someone to come up with as many different uses for that object as possible beyond what it was originally designed to do. A paper clip is supposed to hold papers together, but what else could it become? A hook, a tool, a piece of jewelry, part of a sculpture? And if your first answer is, it can hold the papers together, congratulations, you've successfully identified the paper clip. Now the creativity test can begin. The point is not to find the one correct answer. The point is to see how many different directions the mind is willing to travel. If we only train students to look for the expected answer, then we may be training them for a world that is quickly disappearing. AI can often give us the conventional answer almost instantly. Human value may increasingly come from being able to look at the same object, the same information, or the same problem and ask, what else could this be? That is divergent thinking, the ability to move beyond the obvious and generate possibilities. When you combine creativity with knowledge, experience, judgment, and AI as a tool, let me repeat, as a tool, you can create something much more powerful than simply finding the right answer. You develop the ability to find answers that perhaps no one has considered yet. And that brings me back to one final question, the one we started with. What do we do with unlimited information? We do not simply collect it or memorize it. And we certainly do not assume that having access to information is the same thing as understanding it. We question it, navigate it, connect it, experiment with it, and create with it. Ultimately, we use it to solve problems that may not have a predetermined answer. Perhaps the challenge of education in the age of AI is no longer determining who knows the most. The challenge may be determining who can do the most meaningful, creative, thoughtful, and human things with what we all have access to. Okay, everybody, that brings us to a close of another podcast. Keep your eyes and ears open, stay kind, and be a groovy person. And remember, being creative and innovative is the best way to start and end your day. I'm Richard D. Johnson, the Jazz Architect. I'll see you later.